dream takes shape, it has form and substance, a community soon arose. A listening room, a hearing room, a place to find a home to play. A listening room, the hearing room, express yourself and have your say. The walls are thin, sirens blare, the tables sit near folding chairs, the stage is set with paint and glue, and love went into every screw. The light shine bright on every star, they come to play from near and far. The light shine bright on every star, they come to play from near and far. The listening room, the hearing room, a place to find a home to play. The listening room, the hearing room, express yourself and have your say. Hearing room, a listening room, you're welcome here, so have no fear. The hearing room, come in, my friend, where art can bloom. And welcome to the Woodshed podcast. I'm Aaron Tornberg, and we're here today with Max Shultz. And Max I've known for a while. He used to come to an open mic at Coffee I ran, and he has been to the hearing room and other places, and he gets around. So Max will be on shortly, but first I want to talk about the hearing room and how important it is that we get some memberships to keep going. We do have the need for members in order to keep our doors open, especially right now, because we are not actually open and getting any money for the events. So it does help us. It's just $100 a year, and what we have is we have a system where if we get at least 200 members, we can pay our rent and utilities without trouble. The problem is, we're not there yet. So we need more members who are willing to spend $100 for the year to become a part of the hearing room. And really that makes you a part of it and makes you able to do certain things like get advanced tickets for shows that we have that are a little bigger, because we are only a 50-seat venue and things can sell out quickly. So if you want to make sure you get seats, being a member, you get the first crack at it. And then we also have T-shirts and membership cards, and we also let you have $5 off all events, so that helps too. But what it really does is it keeps the hearing room alive and able to pay rent and utilities, and that is our goal. We are a nonprofit, and I'm not sure what the current tax code says, but if nonprofit again becomes something you can write off on taxes, we are a 501c3. So lots of good stuff at the hearing room, and you can check it out on our website, hearingroom.net. That's for events information, membership information, and details about who we are and what we do. We also want to thank the Greenville Junction Shoppy. That's Greenville Junction, Junction, SHOPPE. The Greenville Junction Shop is an upcycling shop, which means that they get stuff that has been slightly used and they make it available to you. So it's, if you buy stuff on Facebook Marketplace, this is a place to look for some really good items. And they also will have a store before too long. When we can all go out of our houses again, there will be a store in Greenville, New Hampshire you can actually physically go to get the items they have for sale. So check out the Greenville Junction Shoppe. Greenville, JUNKTION SHOPPE, the Greenville Junction Shop on Facebook Marketplace, and eventually in person in a physical space in Greenville, New Hampshire. So now let's talk to Max. So how are you doing, Max?
Hey, Aaron, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great. So we've talked before, and I've seen you perform several times. So I know a lot of your material is autobiographical, but for the sake of our listeners, let's start with, where are you from?
Yeah, I'm from Haverhill, Massachusetts. I've lived here, for the last 21 years, I guess, though I was born in Salem, Mass.
In Salem, Mass. Okay.
Yeah.
And what about your upbringing? You went to high school and all schools in Haverhill?
Yes. I went to, yeah, for all intents and purposes, yes. I went to preschool somewhere else, but for the life of me, I don't know where it was. And then after high school, I went to UMass Lowell for a little while, and I talk about that periodically in my stand-up, and then I ended up going to Northern Essex Community College a couple of years ago.
Okay. Did you graduate yet, or?
Yeah, I have my associate's degree, and the plan is at some point, either in the fall, well, ideally in the fall, to go to a 4-year. Yeah.
Oh, what's the degree in?
My associate's is just a general liberal arts degree, but I want a bachelor's in English with a creative writing minor or focus, or depending on the school, like it changes. But depending on where I go, an English major with a creative writing focus.
Yeah, which is perfect for what you're doing. So
Thank you.
Makes total sense to me. And so the thing you've been doing, besides going to the colleges, was you've been performing stand-up comedy. But your stand-up comedy, I don't know if you could categorize as stand-up comedy exactly. How do you categorize it?
I do categorize it as stand-up comedy, but I don't like you. I'm going to quote you and hope that I'm right, and it was you that said this, but I'm pretty sure it was. You said to me 4 years ago, probably, that you like what I do, but to you it fits better on something like The Moth.
Right. It probably was me. Yeah, I think I did say that.
Yeah. And I think that is fair, and I think that's apt and correct. And I've never been on The Moth, but it's one of those things that, like, eventually I do want to do. But I think that most of what I do is stand-up comedy. It is storytelling. It is story-based. And like in terms of stand-up, like my idol is Mike Birbiglia, who is like, I would love to be able to at some point in my career write a show like he does. Like the only two comedians I can think of that do that are him and Craig Ferguson, but very differently. But where they have an hour and a half on one premise.
And the premise thing, I think that's pretty difficult to do, but it would be great. Because what was that one Mike Birbiglia did?
Sleepwalk with Me.
What?
Sleepwalk with Me?
Yeah, he did that, but the one he did on Netflix, What I Should Have Said Was Nothing.
Yes.
That's a great one, a great example of taking one premise and sort of building on it. And he does a great job building off of that one thing.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. And in my stand-up, like, it's, and unfortunately, I don't think you've seen me do stand-up in at least 2, if not maybe 3 years. But it's changed a lot through the years, and it's one of those things that, like, and I'm sure that, like, most performers, whatever medium it is, would say this about their craft too. But, like, every year I'm able to look back at the previous however many years and think that right now I have the best material I've ever had. And I can say that still, like, I think it is very storytelling based. But I mean, I get up and I compete with any other stand-up,
Yeah. So the stuff that I have by the Songus show from January that we'll play later, that's your most recent stuff, I take it.
I mean, like, I write constantly and I try new stuff constantly. I mean, even depending on when this airs, ideally this won't be true anymore. But right now we're all in isolation, and I've been doing stand-up online. I don't think any of what I'm doing right now is in what I sent you. But that is the most recent recording that's not that's like audible and isn't just for me. Yes.
Okay.
That is, I would say, the most polished of my stuff right now that I still perform. Yeah.
Well, now, one of the things you did that I thought was really impressive early on is you wrote a book. And
Yes.
I want to talk to you about the book because I know a little of the story, but I want you to expand on it. When you wrote the book, you did it after this big trip. So talk to me about what happened in your life that led to all that.
Okay. So before the trip, when I was 19, I was like in probably the biggest like mental depression of my life, where I was going to college and just dreading it. It was I hated going to UMass Lowell for a lot of reasons. That I'll get to in a minute, but I was doing that. I had a job that was a nightmare. I had a horrible home life. And I had been 8 months probably into doing stand-up comedy, but that wasn't the point of the trip. It just kind of happened to get lumped together. And so I was doing all these things, and then I was talking to a friend of mine who kind of was just saying, that you can do things other than go to college and get a job and have a 9 to 5. Like, there are other things you can do with life. So I took the plunge, and I dropped out of college. I quit my dead-end job, and I corrected my home life a little bit. And I worked a different job. I worked at Domino's for 4 months, working roughly 60-hour weeks every week. And I saved up, bought a falling apart $2,000 '96 Camry that leaked gas when you parked it in any direction. And I bought that car. I threw all my stuff in the trunk in the back seat, and I drove for 3 months. I drove by myself to Florida and then west to Phoenix before darting back from Phoenix to Philadelphia in like 2.5 days, which is a nightmare, but a thing that I did for a family crisis. But before I continue, I should ask you, Aaron, I should ask this before. Am I allowed to swear?
I don't check off explicit usually, but if you do swear, I would.
I'll hold my tongue. Like, there were a couple times where I was going to, and I was just like, I don't know the predicate here. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So I left for 3 months, and then I came back from Phoenix to Florida. Yeah, from Phoenix to Philadelphia to go to a funeral, actually, which is a bit of a spoiler, but the book's been out for years. So sorry. So I came back for a funeral, which was hectic, and then I got home a couple weeks later, and I wrote down what is this chapter about that funeral. Like a super rough draft, not meant for anybody's eyes but mine. I just kind of wanted to remember what how I was feeling and all that stuff at the time, like years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote that, and I wrote what is now, I don't remember what chapter number it is, but the chapter Mr. Rogers in Tokyo. I wrote those 2 chapters around the same time and just kind of literally threw them in a drawer in a notebook. And then, I don't know, 6 months later, I hadn't really thought about it. I was just getting a drink with a guy that I had used to work at that Domino's with. And he knew I was a stand-up and stuff, and he asked me what I was working on, and I mentioned that I had written a couple of essays, and I didn't really have a home for them, and I didn't know that I wanted a home for them. And we were drinking, and he just drunkenly was like, oh, no, just make it a book, and my wife will edit it for you, and then you'll have an editor. And, I laughed it off, thinking he was pulling my string. And so then a little while later, I ran into the same guy, and he, sober, was criticizing me, when are you going to get my wife this book? And at that point, I knew that he wasn't joking around, but I said to him, I don't know your wife. We've never met. I don't know this woman. She's not, I don't know her. Just because she's your wife doesn't mean she's my friend or whatever. So he insisted that it would work out, and then he set up basically a meeting where the 3 of us had lunch somewhere, and it was, he's a good friend of mine, but it was at that point that both me and his wife realized that I was there for her to edit a book of mine that I had now been working on, and she did not know why she was there. He had not brought up to her about editing at all. But then she did end up becoming my editor, and it was a very fun experience for both of us, because that's her dream job, is being an editor, and she's a damn good one. However, she that's not much like me. Our craft isn't what we make a profession on. But Heather Terrell was my editor, and likely will be down the road for other projects. And then after about 2 years of rewrites and stuff like that, the book came out February of 2017. And it's written in a way that it's 21 essays about this very long road trip. Some are satirical, some are jokey, some are very serious. But it's written in a way where if you were to pick up the book, read the back of it or something, or just have a general understanding, and read chapter 2 or 12 or 19, it wouldn't matter. They're their own full essays in themselves without other context really needed.
Okay. And it is for sale on Amazon, right? Yeah,
it's on Amazon. It's you can buy it at Bull Moose, although currently only on their website because like all the stores are closed. It's, as far as I know, although I probably should bite my tongue, but I think it's for sale at the Hearing Room when that reopens.
Yes, it is.
I thought so. And there's a couple other like little places like that are around that you could probably find. But bullmoose.com right now and amazon.com are the best way to find it. It's called This Is Why You Know Me. And my name on the book is my full name. It's Maxwell Shultz, not Max.
And Shultz is spelled
Shultz. I appreciate that. Oh, and the other place you can buy it, which I never think of this, and that's my fault, but it is available on my website, which is maxwellschultz.com. Again, Shultz. And on there you can find clips of comedy. You'll find the clip that we're playing at the end of this episode up there. You can find excerpts of my writing that aren't in that book. There's all sorts of stuff you can find on there.
Yeah. And what else do you have on your website?
I have a link to my podcast that I co-host with Ben Bunker, who I think has been on this show, right?
Just was, yes.
Yeah,
right?
He just was. Okay. That's what I thought. I talked to him recently, and I knew he either just was or was about to be. Mm-hmm. So we co-host a podcast, and there's a link to that on there, although that's been in a little bit of a hiatus, although I don't want to give too much away. But by the time this airs, ideally, we will have at least recorded a couple of new episodes. I don't know if they'll be out yet, but that's going back in the works.
Yeah, well, I was on that show a while ago.
You were, yeah. It is you. I'm not even totally sure why, but your interview is one of my most memorable of doing that show.
Okay.
I very vividly remember talking to you about Neil Young for like a really long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my son was there at the same time, so that was also memorable, I'm sure.
I remember he was just playing on a tablet, I think, or a phone or something.
Yeah, which he still does, like everybody else.
Right.
But yeah, so you got the podcast, and you got videos of your performances and stuff.
Yeah, and those ideally I'll have more of available soon. Though, about 3 months ago, I guess in January, I performed at the Tsongas Center in Lowell, Massachusetts to like the side room. I don't want to make it sound like I sold out, a 5,000 seat auditorium, but the small room, and that is probably one of the best recordings I have, and it's also, I believe, the most amount of paid people I performed in front of ever.
Wow.
I believe.
And that was just your show?
No, I was opening for that was so Dave Radigan, who's a local comedian who's a bit older than me. He booked the show, but it was the full show, which I don't know if there's a recording of the whole thing. I just recorded my part on my phone, but it was me, Connor Sullivan, Liam McGurk, Carolyn Riley was the headliner, and then Alex Giampapa hosted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, what are you doing right now in terms of, like, obviously when you're in your house, you're doing online stuff. But in general, what's the direction of your career? What have you been doing before this happened?
Yeah, really lately it's been a lot of it's silly because, of course, like, I think everybody's in the same boat. Like, right as things are going well, things go wrong in the world. But I was, doing just I was on stage, and I guess technically still am just through my computer. I am on stage literally as often as I can be. Before isolation started, I was doing 4, 5, 6 open mics a week, oftentimes 2 or 3 in a night. But I was also there's a show on Monday at Maggie's Lounge in Quincy that I was getting thrown on, and that's not an open mic. It's like an unpaid thing. I did Pick a Side Stupid, which is a podcast out of the same location through Zoom actually a couple weeks ago. Although like I would have done that in person had the world climate not been the way it is. Where else have I been going? But I did the Thing at the Songest Center. I did, let's see, I don't know. I've done a lot of that. A lot of open mics and a lot of open mic adjacent stuff. But I've been performing in Manchester, Lowell, Salisbury, Quincy, Boston, Somerville, Nashua. I'm all over the place.
Now, tell me, what's the difference? Because I know the music open mics or the mixed music and comedy. Do you go to the comedy only open mics?
Yeah, there is only really there's only really one mixed mic I still go to. Although I chuckle because I'm currently running a mixed mic through Zoom. And if people have interest, the best way to find that, if that's still going when this airs. If you guys, listeners, know me or whatever, you can just reach out to me or whatever, and I can send you the link. But every Wednesday night at 10. Right now I'm running a mixed mic. But the only mixed mic in person that I've been going to is Fodi's in Nashua on Wednesdays. It's run by two good friends of mine who are the founding members of the band The Humans Being. And I've been going to that mixed mic. However, other than that, it's been just comedy mics. And the difference is, like at a mixed mic or just a music open mic, it's a bunch of musicians or both, and everybody gets, 2 songs or 10 minutes or something like that. And at a comedy mic, it is way more competitive, way more aggressive, I guess is the word I'll use. And it's every comedian gets 5 minutes. You do not go over your time. If you do, it's like you're the bad guy of the night usually. It's very cliquey. It's very which I think is very toxic. I don't like that part of it, but it is very cliquey. It's very internalized stress, and there is that mentality a lot of the time of like, oh well, these 4 people have been here longer, so they're going to have an advantage no matter what. And I'm not going to badmouth specific places, but like there are open mics specifically that I go to where like I can get there at sign up and I'm still going to go 34th. It doesn't matter. And which is another thing too. Like a lot of the time, comedy open mics. Like if you go to a music open mic, there's it's a good night if you have 15 performers. Like that's a great night. A lot of the time. And at comedy, like if you have 40, that just means you're a decent open mic. Or even if you're not good, you're accessible. That's all that means. Like it's very common to have that many people. I mean, the last open mic I did as a comedian, there were 20 of us, and it was a slow night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so one of the things that struck me when I first heard you performing was your story about pizza delivery.
Yeah.
Could you kind of retell that?
No, but yes. So it's funny. I like could have bet money that you were going to say something along those lines. Because there's like some people, and I know that you're one of them, who like I guess I don't totally understand why, but like there's some people like you who I know loved that material, and I did too, but it's been a long time. So I know the joke you're referring to, and for listeners, when I first started doing stand-up, I had like a 5-minute joke about like the 6 or something different kinds of people who order pizza.
Well, there's that, but there was the whole story about delivering to this weird group and getting involved with them intimately and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
like that's a story that like I wasn't sure that you knew, but I was also like hesitant to say that because like I'm not swearing.
Well,
so
we'll mark this explicit. Just
okay, sure.
Yeah.
So I if
So-
this isn't the story you're thinking of, let me know. But like the gist of the story that I think you're talking about is I was delivering for Domino's in the time that I was talking about before I went on the trip that book's about.
Right.
And I delivered. The order was 2 bottles of water, a small cheese pizza, and 2 I don't know what those things are called, but the hot lava cakes, 2 lava cakes from Domino's. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And it was like in the backwoods of Haverhill, over by like the technical school, if you know Haverhill, down like a swampy street. Like my car was in like the mush as I walked up to their house, and there was a woman. Like I knocked on the door, a woman answered the door wearing like a negligee, and that was about it. And she took the food, but it was like just weird the whole time in the background, like just out of my line of vision. There was like a sound that I admittedly have never heard since, I don't think. If I have, it was disguised. A sound I've never heard since, but what was clearly a man ball gagged, and then I realized that they were going to have sex with this food once I left. And I really do think about those people all the time, like what was going on there.
Yeah,
I'm guessing that was the story you were talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've heard, you hear delivery people sometimes get very weird people that they deliver to, but
yeah, it's super weird, and it's one of those things. Like, and I still deliver food, not as much as I did back then, but like it is a relatively steady income, and it pays the bills. So I'm doing that in the meantime. But like, you do like there's this weird thing, like more generic than the story I just told. But there's this weird thing with delivering food where you know wholeheartedly that you're interrupting people having sex. And I've noticed and I told this differently, I'm sure, in a joke years ago, but like when you deliver to somebody in a better neighborhood, usually like a wealthier neighborhood, they usually answer the door like angry and pissed off. And when you do it in a lower income neighborhood, they're very understanding. But either way, it's always like a guy wearing poorly thrown together clothes, sometimes clothes that are clearly not his, answers the door, usually shirtless, while a person in the background, usually a woman, is wearing almost no clothing and like embarrassed about the situation, but the guy's kind of proud about it. And it's this weird, I think it's just like a weird kink people have is like, oh, let's see if we can finish before the guy gets here.
Yeah. And they did order it, so they know you're coming. Yeah.
Exactly. And it happens like, and it's funny, like I would say that to like, people I work with, and they would say things like, oh, I've never noticed that. Like, is that really a thing? And by the end of the week, they're like, oh, now that you've pointed it out, I picked up on it 3 times. It's like, yeah, it happens constantly.
Yeah. So,
and I don't know if it's in that clip that's going to end this. I don't think it is. But I have a joke that I've been like, it's got to be the joke that I've rewritten more than any other joke. But like the premise is, and it's a real story that I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, my father was delivering food because he that's what he also does, and he delivered to a pornography actress.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was this very weird thing where like he gave the food, and he knew what was going on because he gave the food, but it was one of those situations which sounds weird, but trust me, it's very normal in delivery where like you go to the door, you knock on the door, and the person who answers says, "Oh, let me go grab the money, just come in and put it on the counter," and like welcome you to the front of their house. So that's what happened. A woman wearing virtually no clothing welcomed him inside and said, "Put it on the counter," and she went in the other room. But it was like one of those apartments that like I feel like most people have lived in. It's usually like a first apartment where like the living room and kitchen are the same room. They're just divided by the back of a couch.
Okay.
And so like a guy was sitting on the couch watching a projector, and then my dad, because it was very out in the open, my dad just looked, and it's a guy on the couch watching a porno, and the woman in the porno was the woman going to get the money, but the guy is not the guy sitting down. And then like, so he's trying to wrap his brain around what's going on in the situation. She came back, paid him, and then he left and immediately called me, his son, at like midnight to tell me this story. And I feel like, it's only fair that now I tell strangers all the time about that the time my dad delivered to a porn star.
Yeah. And this was in Haverhill?
As far as I know, yeah. But I mean, I guess I don't totally know that part. But yeah, as far as I know, yes. Yeah.
So I guess porn can be made anywhere now.
Porn can be made anywhere. Absolutely. It's a very accessible industry.
Yeah. So I guess you did pizza delivery, and then you went to school, and you continued to do it while you were at school?
Yes. Yeah. For a while. Yeah, for a little while, and then I want to say, although now that you said that, I'm getting my wires crossed, but I think I started delivering food while I was in school, because before that, before I was delivering food, I was a secretary in 2 different driving schools for like 3 years.
Oh yeah.
Which was just a nightmare, but one of those jobs that I look back at and go like, if it were just a little bit different, it would have been a dream job, because it was a failing auto school, so we had very few customers. and I was there alone most of the time. Like, I would argue 80% of the time I was there by myself. So I would just sleep hunched over the desk because if the door opened, the whole building shook and the phone was violently loud. So there was no way for me to get caught, and I never did.
Yeah, and driving, like teaching people to drive, you mean?
No, that was what the school was. I was just the secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was one of those like weird, and I've written a little bit about this prose-wise, but it was a weird job where like, there was one day I was there alone in like the middle of July, and a guy working for Kia came up and knocked on the door, and he was like, "Hey man, I hate to tell you, but I have to repossess the only driving car you guys still have. He was like, there's not really anything you can do. I'm just gonna take it." And I just figured I had to tell someone I was taking it. And then I had to like scramble all week to try to figure out how to get this car back.
Yeah.
From New Jersey.
What was it? They didn't pay the payments, or?
Yeah, they were like 3 months behind on payment or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, but like it's interesting to have one of your first jobs, and that was, I guess, technically my third job, but it was the first like real on the books job I had. Be just such a nightmare at failing, and one of those, both of my bosses blaming everybody in the universe but themselves for why it failed and all this stuff, and it was just, well, when you're a teacher and you chain smoke cigarettes in the classroom, like, yeah, kids are gonna stop showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's weird.
It was super weird, but like also like a really interesting introspective on like, oh, this is how like some adults just are. Because I was 15, 16 when I started that job.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting, yeah.
So what did you do after the first school experience? You just
so first time I went to school was at UMass Lowell, and like I talked about earlier, I hated most parts of it, and I don't need to spend your time, my time, or the listeners' time talking like trashing UMass Lowell, but like the gist was I was there and I didn't really know why. I just kind of did that thing that 18-year-olds do where I finished high school and I just did the next thing, which was college. With no way to pay for it, so it felt like I was just dumping money in a hole, and I hated most of my professors, and like I thought that like the coursework was silly. Like I thought that my first English class I took that I had to take, I didn't have an option test out of it, but it was the equivalent of like 5th grade English. We literally wrote a 5-paragraph essay as the first assignment, and my first math class was the first problem was 6 divided by 2. There were 8 steps, and in a classroom of 50 people, 2/3 of them did not understand this, like, general division.
Yeah.
And I was paying roughly $40 an hour to be a part of it. And then I dropped out, went on that big, long road trip, and then after I got back from that, I started kind of just aggressively going into comedy. And I still am. Like I said, I've been performing more and more every year. The whole time I've been doing it. I mean, I started out at Coffee. I think you were probably there for the first time I ever did stand-up, honestly. And it was at Coffee. And the first year I did stand-up was there. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I went on that trip and I did stand-up in open mics in almost every state I was in. And, like, at this point, I want to say there are only, like, 8 or 9 states I haven't done stand-up in, which is kind of cool. And I wrote the book, and then the other thing too, which like we haven't mentioned, and I don't even know if you know about, but when I was at UMass Lowell, I joined the radio station, and then just because a lot of right place, right time situations, I'm still there. I'm just a community member, and so I've had the same radio show every Tuesday from 6 to 8 for about 6 years.
Oh yeah, 6 to 8 p.m.
6 to 8 p.m. We've had 25 different people come and go on the show, but it's been me as a staple the whole time. Right now, we're not broadcasting. We're trying to figure out a way to do that from all of our respective homes. But when the world is not in isolation, every Tuesday, 6 to 8, 91.5 if you're local, or WUML.org, I run a show called Poptarts in my VCR.
Yeah, and we actually had somebody else on the show who's a DJ in the mornings on Monday and Tuesday, David Tierney.
He's great.
Yeah.
Raven Dave.
Yeah, so if you want to hear his podcast, it's back in the archives.
Very cool. I didn't know you knew him.
Yeah, and I was actually on his show a couple of times. It was fun. It's really early. I mean,
his show's at what, 9?
9. So that means you have to meet him at 8 because there's nowhere to park. So
Oh, it's a nightmare.
yeah.
I mean, I've been doing that show for 6 years, and 4 of them, 4.5 of those years, I haven't gone to that school. And parking is and I park every time, but it's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful. But right now we've got a really good crew of co-hosts, and the only thing that's weird is that I'm 25 and most of them aren't yet 20. So there's this weird, even though it's only 5 years, there's a bunch of things that they'll talk about, and I will just have no concept of what's happening in these conversations because 5 years difference in cultural norms makes a big difference.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you've been doing that a while. How did you get into radio?
It was, I mean, it's not super upbeat, but it's literally, I was depressed and at school, and I could not make a friend or even a person to talk to save my life. But radio always interested me. So I became an intern at the radio station, under a guy named David Gallo, who actually he was on my show 6 months ago, and that was the first time I'd seen him since. I interned under David Gallo for a semester, and then I became a DJ, which was very cool. And basically every friend I have from Maxwell who I didn't know before going there, I met through the radio station. But I also joined the Connector, which is their student-run newspaper, and I did that for a semester. But then I dropped out, but was allowed to keep doing my show. But I wasn't able to do the newspaper, of course.
So when you say you DJ, does that mean you mostly play music?
It's funny. It's yes, and yes. It used to be that way, and still is, I guess. It is mostly a hodgepodge, whatever kind of music show. I play mostly folk, but I mean, co-hosts of mine of the past and present have played a lot of EDM music, folk, jazz music, rock music, only live stuff, only stuff their friends have played, only instrumental prog rock. We've been everything, but lately it's been much more of a talking show that's very jokey and slapstick, but caring and nice. And my co-host Molly really helps steer the way with a lot of that stuff right now.
Mm-hmm. So that sounds interesting. So it's sort of like public radio.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a nonprofit radio station that's been going since 1952.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the thing too that I say on air all the time, and I know no one laughs, I don't think, but I think you might, is that you can call into the station and it's very easy to do so. But I'm the guy, I'm running the board and talking, and the guy that will answer the phone. And the joke that I say on air is, I don't have a Roz Doyle.
Yeah,
comparing myself to Frasier, but nobody my generation seems to know what Frasier is. So
I know what it is. Yes,
I know you do.
I mean, didn't that start in the 80s? I mean,
Frasier. I know this, and it's probably sad that I think Frasier started in 94.
Oh, did it?
Cheers was 83.
Yeah, Cheers started way back.
Yeah.
But then when
Frasier, real quick, Frasier Crane is the character that Kelsey Grammer played for 21 years.
Yeah, and
is actually talking about reviving potentially.
Well, why not?
I'm all for it. I think there's a lot of cool ways you can take that character. But
yeah, his father on the show, didn't he die?
John Mahoney died a couple of years ago.
Yeah. But that is a good show.
Yeah.
So you were, so you answer the phone while you're on air and everything.
No. That was the point I'm getting at. I literally cannot answer the phone while I'm on air. So I tell people, if you're going to call, wait until you don't hear us talking anymore.
Right.
Wait until there's a song coming through your radio or something. Because there's virtually, the delay I think is 2 seconds. There is no delay. It's just what you hear is at the same time that we're talking.
Yeah. So you go to UMass Lowell, then you start doing comedy, and we were talking about how you did your first stuff maybe at Coffee for a while.
Yeah.
And then you just, from my perspective, you just were gone on a trip, and I sort of heard you were leaving, and then you came back and you had a book. So
Which is funny because like I left on the trip, came back, and then that book wasn't like a tangible thing for almost 2 years after I got back.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, like I had been back, and then I was writing it most of the time I got back. Like I got back, wrote those first two essays that are almost nothing like what they are now. Like they're still nonfiction, but they're way more developed now in the book than they were. Like for me, it was like, the last essay I think in the book is 12 pages, and when I was writing it, I think it was 2, and way less meaningful at the time. But other than those 2 essays, I didn't write any prose really for like 6 months, and then about 2 years after that, Heather and I finally finished whatever. Like it kind of got to the point where it was like, we can spend forever, nitpicking and being perfectionists or whatever, but this is as done as it's going to be. And then it's been out for 3 years this year. It's been out for 3 years. But yeah, there was like 2 years that I was back, and at Coffee Copy, but also at a handful of other places at least. Like I was in Nashua at that point. I was doing stuff. Back then I was still doing the mixed mic at Riverwalk Cafe in Nashua.
Yeah.
I probably had been at Strange Brew in Manchester at least once or twice by that point. And like I said, I had done stand-up in almost every city I went to on that trip. Like there were even, I think, a couple of places that I did stand-up in when I wasn't even sleeping near that city. I was like on the way, I found an open mic or something. Yeah, and so, I mean, I've met so many comedians, even just at like I am a professional because I've been paid. I mean, the first time I got paid was 2 years in, 3 years in. But like I'm an amateur comedian. Like I go to open mics along with all these other people. But I would argue I have met easily 1,000 comedians in the time I've done this. Even if it's just for like one night, I just see this person, we have a beer together. I would argue I've seen at least 1,000 different people do this.
Yeah, and actually, who still goes to open mics is Jimmy Tingle. I mean, I've seen he's gone to an open mic at the Lizard Lounge when I was going there in Cambridge, but he showed up at the Hearing Room once. So
I feel bad. I don't know that name.
Jimmy Tingle is like a local Boston comedian who does a lot of political stuff.
Okay.
But you ought to check him out. Because he's local, you'll run into him. I mean, if you start doing Somerville, Cambridge, I'm sure you'll run into him at some point.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like, I'm guessing that like general archive, not archive, but like that like generation of Boston comedy. Like I know Tony V and Dave Radigan and Jeff Cohen, and I know those people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So why don't we get to talking about that? I'm going to take a little break here, but we can, when we come back, I thought we could talk about your mentors and
Sure. Okay.
how you got into comedy and what inspired you, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and if you want, there's a couple page excerpt I can read from my book that I think is at least a little. It's dark, but I think it's a little bit helpful. It might be helpful to people at like the way the world is right now with isolation and stuff.
All right, we'll do that. So hang on for a minute, Max. Well, sure. I'm going to talk about the Hearing Room. And the Hearing Room is, as I said before, at hearingroom.net. And what we're looking for is members at hearingroom.net. We want $100 memberships in order to keep us going through this and to keep us going all year. Really, we need to help paying the rent and utilities. Initially, we had benefactors who were doing it for us, but now we really need help from the community. So if you use the Hearing Room for anything, for shows or to come play at open mics or jams, we need the help. So you can contribute, and you do get $5 off events. So if you're coming to the event anyway, then you'll be able to just take the suggested donation off, and that's a nice thing to be able to do. And you can still donate if you wish. We'll always take the money to help us pay for things that we need. But you should definitely check it out. And also, we are always looking for people to help with shows. So if you want to run the door run sound, do stuff like that. We are looking for those people as well. And we also are always looking for people who just want to come and kind of hang out and give us ideas about things we can do. So it's hearingroom.net. That's where you should go. And this time you should also keep a lookout, because we do have Zoom open mics now. That's the Zoom video conferencing software. So if you want to participate in an open mic or a jam, we have it there. The jams are a little more challenging because it's not synchronous, but it's still, you can get together with people virtually, and for open mics, it works fine. All right, so we also want to thank the Greenville Junction Shoppy. Greenville, JUNKTION The Greenville Junction Shop is an upcycling shop, and they have furniture, household appliances, and electronics, and other cool things that you can go purchase. And they are all used items, either found at estate sales, auctions, garage sales, wherever. And they do help with estate and garage clean-out, which is always important if you're looking to get rid of some stuff. And sometimes you need the kick to get rid of it. So check that out on Facebook Marketplace, Greenville, JUNKTION, and Shoppy, SHOPPE, the Greenville Junction Shop at Facebook Marketplace, and soon to have its own store in Greenville, New Hampshire. So please check them out. And now we'll go back to Max Shultz. So, Max, you there?
Yep.
All right. So, what do you want to do first?
I mean, it's just, I can do the book excerpt. It is 2 whole pages. That's it. It's just I can do that. It's just because it's in my hand. Then we can go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
It is. I will preface this. It is rather dark, although I think it is one of my favorite pieces of this book. But it's out of the middle of the book. It's called Alone, and I'm going to abridge it a little bit for people who read the book, because it does talk about my previous host. But other than that, I'll keep it the same.
Okay.
While I was in Erie, Colorado one day, after my host had left, I hit the point that every solo long-term traveler hits: absolute aloneness. I would go on and ask other travelers about this, and we all agree that there's no word for the notion I experienced, but it happens to all of us. In my case, I was taking a shower in my host's basement, and it dawned on me that I had not seen a familiar face in over 6 weeks. Shy of a few days, no one within 100 miles really knew anything about me. That feeling crippled me for about a half hour, and I sat down on the edge of his tub until the water went cold. I remained there until his dog showed up. I petted the animal for a little bit and got comfort in that. I realized that this wasn't a depression. Depression lasts a while and is usually loaded with anxiety, at least in my case. This, however, was an absolute aloneness, a feeling where you know you are the only person you know and will see for a long time. It is also one of the strangest feelings I've ever experienced. It was something I wish someone had warned me of, because I didn't know how to handle it. So for any future travelers, watch out. When I left on this trip, I had been looking to find myself, and the best way to do that was to get as far away from any sort of comfort zone as I could and see how I reacted. In this specific instance, I reacted with tears, followed by countless cigarettes and some weed on a stranger's back deck. In other instances where I felt this alone on the trip, I would react by driving faster or in a more specific direction. Sometimes I would call someone I knew. It's a good feeling, though. I make it sound murky, but in actuality, it shows any given individual how they must handle themselves and who they actually are. In my case, I was a cigarette addict who needed travel and eventual companionship. These are things I could and did live constantly with. It wasn't long after this that I began driving again, leaving Colorado behind and heading toward Phoenix. And that's the piece there. But I find that being in isolation and everything right now, like while you're not on a trip away from anybody, other than the people you live with, or maybe the mailman, it's very difficult to see anybody. And it really does show, I think, how you handle being by yourself. Mm-hmm. Which can be scary, but I think it's a thing that we should all at least have some kind of a grasp on.
Yeah, being by yourself is difficult. Are you living with people right now?
Yeah, I have 3 roommates right now, yeah.
Okay, well, that's good.
It is, and we all get along. It's a good setup, especially for isolation, where we all get along. We eat dinner together and all that stuff, but then we all do our own things in our bedroom and can go a full day without even seeing each other. It's like a perfect balance of privacy space, but not total aloneness.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're young, so family has not happened yet.
No, I mean, like of course I have family, but like no, I'm not a father.
You didn't start your personal family.
No, no, not really, not in any way.
So let's talk about the comedy. So first of all, what started it? I mean, where you said, I would be good at comedy, right? How do you get there?
I feel like in a lot of ways this is the story that most comedians I know have, but in other ways it's not. So I was from ages, I don't know, 12 or 13 to 18 or 19. I was in and out of all sorts of middle school and high school and post-high school bands. And, my first band we covered Walk This Way, and that was the only song we did. And then the last band I was ever in was a 4-piece folk thing that became a 3-piece, that became a 2-piece. And that 2-piece ultimately was me and my best friend at the time, where I was the front man and the drummer, and he was the keyboard player. And we were getting like booked on shows, and we were getting moving in the general area. And then we got booked to do, last minute somebody bailed, and we were booked to play at I forget the name of the venue, but it doesn't exist anymore. But it was like Nirvana got like a big start there, and so did like the Pixies and a lot of bands like that in Boston. And if I think of the name of it later, I'll throw it out there. But right now it escapes me. But I closed a couple years ago. But anyways, we got booked to do that. It would have been like a big deal, a big break for that band. And then like 12 hours before we had to be there, my partner texted me that he had to work and couldn't get out of work, which I still think was bullshit. But that was what happened. So I had to cancel the show. Mm-hmm. The show went on. I canceled our part of it. But the band dissolved after that, and I'm one of those people, and I know you are too, and I think, I've shaped my life where most people I know are like this, where I have to perform. It is a thing that it's like in my blood. Mm-hmm. And in high school, my junior year in high school, 2 good friends of mine, Jermichael and Megan, who neither one of them I've seen in a little while, but like they're those friends that you pick up where you leave off when you see them. But they kept urging me to like write my rhetoric down, maybe do stand-up, something like I could make something out of this. And they said that truly almost every day for 2 years. And then I was down on my luck, out of that band, lonely I think I was 19 when I started comedy. And in the span of like a week or a week and a half, 3 things happened that were just like, this is weird and uncomfortable. But I kept thinking about it, like, I guess the way I write stand-up now, which is, from a bird's eye view, these are probably funny. And I knew Coffee was an open mic that was going on because other friends of mine had performed there, like Ricky Kiernan had played there, and Mike Hovnanian had played there, and who else did I know at that point? Shane Pastana had played there, people like that. And I'm not sure if you remember any of those names.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. They would play there, and I would go there with them and just like get a cup of coffee and hang out. So I knew that open mic was there. I had no idea comedy open mics were a thing. But so I went there by myself on some Wednesday night probably, and I just told my 3 stories as I had reworked them in my head. And I'm sure that they sounded terrible. But at the time, I thought they went all right. And that I can't do any of the jokes now, but it was a story about how I was in a Chinese food restaurant, and a woman came in and just aggressively tried to convince me that she was Mariah Carey while she was clearly on the cocktail of drugs. One was about graffiti that I had seen that I thought was silly, and then another one was about a coworker of mine specifically asking me if I had a crack thing, just casually wondering if I did crack cocaine, which I didn't and haven't. But anyway, so I went to Coffee, told those 3 stories to like a room of people who are not my demographic. They're mostly older people, and it seemed to go okay. So I just kept going, and I enjoyed it. And I still, it is literally, doing stand-up is truly my favorite thing in the world. I would rather do that than anything else. So that was kind of how it started, and then I never really looked back. Like, I haven't been in a band since that band. Other than like one-offs, like like Ben Bunker, who's been on, like we talked about earlier, he's my best friend, and I've backed him on drums a few times, but I've never been in like a band with him. In my radio station that I'm at, used to do cover shows every year. Like you would form a band with other station members, and you would cover 3 or 4 songs from whatever band. And I was in those a couple of times. Like I was a drummer in in a Weezer cover thing, and then I was a drummer and a frontman in an REM one. But other than stuff like that, like I haven't been in a formal band of any kind in, I guess, 6 or 7 years. Mm-hmm. And I've just been doing stand-up the whole time. This year will be, I believe, my 6th year of stand-up.
And so when you started stand-up, what did you watch? Who did you look at as, let me see what they're doing and try to deconstruct it?
See, it's funny. Like it's questions like that like I've asked myself later on and realized, like looking back, why conversations went weird. Like why, like you would say, like I like what you do, but it's more fitting for the moth or something. I didn't really do any like deconstructing. I didn't look at comedians and like try to backtrack or try to like figure out how they got there until way later. And even still, I'm bad at that. But I will say at that point, like. I grew up at probably way too early an age listening to everything that George Carlin had ever touched. My first couple of jobs involved like me being alone with headphones, and it was 80% of that was me just cycling through his catalog of work. But early on I was into Carlin and early Eddie Murphy stuff and Dimitri Martin stuff and a lot of people who were just super mainstream, but like I didn't know the difference then, I guess. But it was mostly Carlin, which is weird because I was never a political comedian, and I to this day I think in my however many minutes I've written of stand up, I've probably done fewer than 10 jokes that are in any way political. Mm-hmm. But I got started listening to him, but it was mostly just like conversations with friends and stuff like that started me. And now, like I said, like Birbiglia is like probably my biggest like that, like the dream is Birbiglia, I think, for me in terms of stand up. And in prose, it's David Sedaris is my idol. But I don't know. I don't really do that thing where I deconstruct other comedians' stuff. I wish I could remember who, but I was talking to another comedian about a month ago about this. I want to say it was Zach Silverman, but I could be wrong. Who's also a local guy. But like I go to comedy open mics and I go to comedy shows and I do all these things because at the end of the day I like comedy. Like even if I go to an open mic and I have a terrible set, I'm still probably going to stay till the end because at least half these people are really good and I know their material. And I think it's not my peers that I like do that to, but I think it's more there's stuff that like I just don't deconstruct. I just listen to so often I can do it word for word. Like when John Mulaney's album New in Town came out in 2014 or 15, I listened to that almost to the point of memorization. And I would say that album was a huge influence on what my stand-up would become. Patton Oswalt's second, third, and fourth records, I would say, are like that. I cannot think of the name of it either, but the Sarah Silverman's special where she's in a room of like 45 people, that was hugely influential to me. Yeah, I would say a lot of that stuff.
It's interesting. When I was a kid, I actually did, in 5th grade, I did stand-up. Yeah. But what I did is we used to, and this was a thing for a long time, memorize Bill Cosby routines.
Oh, yeah, he was huge, too, for me, like, growing up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Growing up, like, that was what you did for comedy. You memorized Bill Cosby, and he was really great. So it's kind of a shame what happened. But
I saw him live, like, under a year before everything came out.
Oh, yeah?
And I will say, like, he's one that, like, I mean, with a lot of those people, like, I have trouble separating the art from the artist. But I will say with him, it was one of the best comedy shows I've ever been to.
Right. He's amazing. I mean,
he is tremendous at his craft. He really is.
Yeah. I mean, he knows how to time things and he knows how to tell the joke. And he does kind of what you're talking about because a lot of his stuff is based on stories. It's based on his life, and so he talks about his children. He talks about him, his time in as a kid in Philadelphia, all that stuff. So,
Yeah, I would say like it's and like I know some people with my stand-up don't like that I do this, and I kind of get why, but I would say like I get a lot of my material from just like embarrassing things I did to myself in the past, like things that like when I was 15 would have probably sent me into like a horrible depressive cycle that now I look back at and just chuckle. Like I have a joke that I'm still kind of working on, but about this girl that I had a crush on when I was probably like a sophomore in high school or something like that. And she contacted me on Facebook, I think, or maybe she had my number. I don't know. She texted me somehow and just said, "Hey, how are you?" And like my heart flooded, my brain went, fireworks, and all I should have said was like, "I'm doing well. How are you?" or something very simple. And instead, what I said was, "Why are you talking to me?"
Okay.
Because like that, because as a kid I was so anxious, and she said, "Oh, because I think you're a cool kid." And then I don't know how I worded it, but I said something to her along the lines of like, "No, I'm not a cool kid. Like you are. You're a popular person. I am a loser, and we don't communicate. Like this doesn't work." And then she never talked to me again. And it's like, of course she never talked to me. Like that is a crazy thing to say to another adult or another person, another peer. I guess at the time we were both teenagers, but like I think about dumb stuff like that all the time. Like that is the worst. Other than like I'm going to other than like just responding with nonsense. That is the worst response I could have given. But I think about it every so often, and so like that embarrassing or weird things from my past are what make it into my stand-up. And I know a lot of people say, a lot of writers and comedians say this too, but like I have trouble writing about like in any form, poetry, prose, stand-up, anything. I have trouble writing about things that are currently not done, or like at least I'm not convinced they are, which is why a lot of my stand-up, a lot of my prose is about things that have happened like a year ago or something. And that's not always the case, but a lot of the time it is.
So when you get, let's say, an incident like you're describing, what makes that into a routine you can tell as a joke? How do you go through that process?
Usually, not always, but most of the time, it's either for some reason this memory pops in my head, or maybe it is like a real time thing, like an experience happens and it just provokes a lot of emotion, whether it be positive or negative. And then I will sometimes talk with people, and some people like Ben is a person who can see through it, but like I'll just tell the story normally, and just see if it makes people chuckle, and then go from there with it. And then a lot of the time it really is just like constantly like in my head, like retelling the story to myself, like, okay, what do I take out? What works? And then it's being a musician, like I know that this works a lot of the time with music too. Like it's finally performing it, and even if it flops, figuring out why it flopped, or if it goes well, like what can I do to make it better? And a lot of times, if it falls flat because, like there's a joke that I'm not going to tell here because it's not good, but that I did one time, and it is probably the darkest thing I've ever done in my stand-up. And I thought it was funny. I still do, and I expected the audience to like laugh with me, and instead there was like this just crowd of like, oh, like shudder, and it's like, oh, okay, like that's a good marker for me to know, like, okay, that is too dark of a subject for me to go to.
Right.
But the other, a lot of the other times, like I have a joke about my first like romantic high school relationship and how it was just a nightmare, and that became a routine because I was just with a friend talking about bad relationships. Like before, it was literally at a Josh Ritter concert before the lights went out. We were just having a conversation up in a balcony, and I told that story, like not looking for a laugh at all, just like, oh, this is a weird thing that happened in my life. And she said to me, "You need to tell that on a stage. Like that is a perfect joke." In her words, not mine. I don't think it's a perfect joke, but I've been doing it ever since. And I think she's right. It is one of the jokes I tell that gets the better response for sure, because it makes people uncomfortable and draws them back in the middle. But like that's one. I don't know that I ever would have written that into stand-up had someone else not just heard me talking about it and urged me to do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would have happened.
Well, so that's how much material do you have, do you think? Like, when you go to a show, what do they expect you to do?
5 minutes. Well, okay, well, if it's like an open mic, 5 minutes is usually the norm. Some people do 6, some people do 4. If I'm like booked on a thing, it's usually 10.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually 10. I mean, yeah, yeah, usually 10. Although, like, if I were to take everything that is still in the rotation that I remember how to do well, and like if I were to like book a show for myself, and it's rotating and I could stretch it, but I would say in the last few years I've always had close to an hour's worth of material that I can cycle through.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would say for 2 or 3 years that's always been true, and it's not the same. Like if you were to ask me 2 years ago what that hour would have been, virtually none of that is still stuff that I do. But I would say that would be true. Like before, hell, even before the Songus Center thing I did this year, the last time I had been paid was like a year and a half prior to that. In Haverhill, I did a variety show where I was booked to close and do 25 minutes, and then 25, due to the host asking me, 25 became 45, and like went very well. Like I was a good choice for the close. Like the crowd was with me, and I was able to do some crowd work. It was good. And even that was probably now about a year and a half ago. I want to say I only tell one of those jokes still. Maybe 2 of them, but out of 45 minutes, that like I cycle through it quickly. Things drop from my set a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, when you do your stuff, how do you get critiqued? Like, what do you just self
No,
regulate,
so I mean, like there's the instant gratification or instant failing of comedy where how well you're doing because is the audience with you or are they not? Are they laughing? Are they on their phones? Are they talking to their neighbor or are they smoking a cigarette? You know if they're with you or not. But now, like, so it is instant almost every time. But there is that part of it where, like, you're on stage, you're telling these jokes, maybe you're telling something new or something you're unsure of, and you don't know, like you're more focused on what's coming out of your mouth and how they're reacting. And so I've recorded on my cell phone, like, which is usually bad quality, but good enough for me to understand what I'm saying. I recorded almost every set I've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would argue I've recorded 95% of the times I've been on a stage.
Wow.
And I listen back to that stuff. And then it's weird doing like Zoom open mics or Skype open mics, or like a friend of mine does a Facebook Live one. And in those, it's silence. Like there is no laughter to get a feedback of. There's none of that. It's just silence. I'm talking into a void. And then it's reading comments afterwards. Or if it's Zoom, it's watching people silently laugh or like, put a palm to their forehead or something like that. But when the world is anywhere near normal, it's the instant gratification of the sound of the audience, the response of the audience, and then listening back afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but
and the other well, I'm sorry, keep going.
Well, I just was wondering more, like when you get in front of other comedians, do they then talk to you about what to do?
Sometimes. So. That's funny. I meant to say something about that earlier, and I didn't. The first time I really had that happen, I don't know if I talk about it in the book because it doesn't really contribute to the story all that much. But I did like a weird like comedy show in Tennessee in a stranger's living room that I was just for some reason a part of. And at that, I did a joke that like went over well, and then afterwards over a beer or something, a guy was like, "Hey, I like that, but if you tweaked it like this, maybe it would work better." And I'm pretty sure I took it. It's a joke I haven't told in years at this point. But like now, like in New England and stuff, like sometimes you do get that. You get the, you get the host who like, a guy in Quincy did this recently, Sean Rosa, where I told a joke, and then I got off stage and his like introducing the next guy, just took my punchline and just made it better, which is kind of like not mean-spirited, but like he's kind of being a dick there, but he's also being, a little bit helpful. It's nice. But like there are those conversations amongst comedians about like, I like this bit, I don't like this bit, this works, or this works, but I don't like it, but I get why it works. Like you get a lot of that stuff too, yeah.
Yeah, so I ask the question on every show.
Okay.
What advice do you give to other people who want to get into this? So if you are a comedian, what would you tell a 19-year-old who's about to go cross country and wants to do this? How do you give him advice on what to do? Or her?
I'm giving the advice to a 19-year-old.
Or anybody, really.
All right, so the advice changes if you're 19. If you're 19, my advice is, or any age, if you're under 21, my advice is don't stop going out. Get on stage as many times as you can. Even if you're just doing the same 5 minutes every night, go on stage as much as you can. And I would say find yourself a version of a coffee. Find a coffee shop or a bookstore or something like that where you can go and just flop on your face and it doesn't matter. You can go and succeed, and it also doesn't really matter. It's just getting stage time. But also find just comedy open mics where you can go and really try this stuff in front of comedians, in front of an audience who's expecting to laugh. Because that's a big difference between a mixed mic and a comedy mic. Like if you go to a mixed mic, most people aren't expecting comedy. If they are, it's a crapshoot of what they're expecting, and you're going to get hecklers there, and you're going to get people who aren't into comedy. If you go to a comedy mic, whether you're good or not, people are listening. People are all eyes on you. The room's quiet. It's your stage. And there's nothing, unless like a fight breaks out at a bar or something, there's nothing that's going to stop that unless you're, saying horrible things. But like you got to push the bar to be taken off stage early. Like you got to, just say horrible racial slurs or something like that, which doesn't happen.
Well, it does.
It does, but like not nearly as often as I think people might think. Like I've seen it virtually never in comedy mics. I've seen it, and I've seen people be pulled off stage because of it. But it's not like an every night thing. It's not an every week thing. It's a very rarely thing, and just don't do that. I would say if you're going to go into comedy for the first time, or if you're going to go into comedy at any point in your life, just don't be a dick. Talk to people, meet people, be friendly. Don't think you're better than anybody else. Don't think anybody else is better than you, though. Like, really go in and assume everybody's your equal. And the people that are going to insist that they're not, that they're better than you, I'm the host, and you're going to go 34th, or you're going to not go up tonight, you're not going to do whatever. You don't need those people. Those people are not going to help you in any way. They've decided, for the most part, before you even go on stage, that they don't like you. And like, you have to be okay if you're going to go into stand-up. You have to be okay with knowing that sometimes you're going to do really well. And other times, people are going to tell you they don't like you. And I give that advice. All of what I just said, I give to anybody. But if you're under 21, the only part of it that I change, and Aaron, you can edit this out if you want to, lie about your age through your teeth constantly. If there's an open mic at a bar, pretend you're 21 until you get kicked out of that bar. Because when I was 19 and 20 doing this, some of the best interaction I had with comedy was pretending to be older than I was so that I could get into X, Y, or Z bar. I can't stress that enough. But don't be dumb about it. Like, don't get a fake ID and get arrested. Just go in and play down. You get kicked out, say, "Oh, I didn't know it was 21 plus," because for the most part, people aren't going to question that.
I don't disagree with that, but they shouldn't go drinking and getting drunk and driving.
Oh no! Like and I'm not going to name names because they would get them in trouble. But like, I have friends of mine who are 20. I want to say, and very good comedians. And their tactic is they go to X, Y, or Z bar. They order a water from the bar. Usually the bartender knows he's in because he's with this comedy mic. It's the bouncer that wants them out. They go and they order a water or like a soda and they sit in the back and they do not raise suspicion at all. They kind of just look like somebody who quit drinking instead of somebody who's too young to drink.
Right.
Absolutely. Don't push your bluff. Don't order a beer. Like, don't be dumb.
Right.
Don't be dumb. But I would say don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid of criticism, but also don't think you have to take every criticism. Take the chance. Write the joke that you think might make people uncomfortable. And like I said, like, don't say racial slurs, don't say horribly offensive things, don't say, stuff like that. But also don't be afraid to offend people with your content. If you have a joke that you believe in, and it's not about it's not a hate speech type of thing, it's a real just story or joke or whatever you're telling, tell it. You're gonna offend people. I've offended people. It happens, and it sucks. It sucks a lot, but it's fine. In my rule of thumb, and I know comedians differ on this, there's a whole bunch of different opinions in this. My rule of thumb is if I tell a joke and I've offended you, whether you're a friend or a stranger, it doesn't matter, and I've offended you, and I've offended you so badly, you need to tell me about it. I encourage you to tell me about it. If you can tell me why this joke offended you. Because if you can tell me that, maybe I'll correct it, maybe I won't, but it's an open conversation that gets both of us moving in the right direction. But if you come up to me, and this has happened way more often than not, and you just tell me that you didn't like my stuff, my joke offends you, and then I ask you, what didn't you like about it, and you're unable to tell me, that just says to me that you just wanted to cause a scene. That you weren't listening at all. You don't even know what I talked about. And my content probably didn't bother you. But the fact that I did stand up in a place where you didn't want me to, or that I went before you and it made you uncomfortable, something like that, just don't bother telling me that, because that's not productive for anybody.
Right.
And I would say too, this is something I wish I had learned earlier than I did. Figure out, because if you're going to go into stand up, any comedian in the world will tell you, no matter how good, no matter how bad you are, it doesn't matter. You're going to get heckled, probably a lot. Talk to other comedians that you trust. Really think about, how can I deal with that? Because I've dealt with it very well, and the times I've dealt with it well are a couple of instances in my routine now. But I've also dealt with it very poorly. And I would argue most of the time I've been doing stand-up, I dealt with hecklers very poorly. I've walked off stage because of hecklers more than once. Figure out how to not have that happen. Figure out how, if a heckler comes in the room, figure out how to deal with them. And for me, a lot of the time it is, heckler X, Y, or Z interrupted the joke. All right, well, I'll also interrupt the joke, and I'm going to talk just at you, directly at you, until you walk away. And usually they will, because they just want to cause a scene.
Yeah.
It's usually a heckler is harmless. That being said, there is a guy, I don't know his name, but I specifically can think of, who I've watched try to fist fight me in the middle of a joke, and then I watched him try to fight two other comedians on different nights in the middle of their routines as well. People like that, avoid at all costs. Try to get them kicked out of the bar or the coffee shop or wherever you are. But for the most part, people are harmless. But you're gonna encounter a lot of dicks in doing this.
Right.
It's harsh, it's aggressive, it's mean. But if you like it, it's the most fun you'll ever have. And I know most comedians I know would say that.
Why don't we get to your piece that you gave me to play? Okay. This is the Tsongas concert you did in January. It's about 12 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then I'll talk to you after a little bit about it. And so stay on. But okay. Let's hear that right now. So you want to intro this at all?
Yeah, sure. So I briefly talked on this earlier. So this is the recording I did from this is my set, rather, from when I opened for Carolyn Riley at the Tsongas Center in the Talon Room, I think is what it's called. And Connor Sullivan was the other opener that night. He worked for the Tsongas Center, and they run about once monthly comedy shows there. They're not happening right now because of isolation, but I think the original plan was that they were going to stop for the summer and pick it back up in August. Though don't quote me on that. Connor Sullivan's a great guy, and if you do stand up, or if you are just if you do stand up or watch amateur stand up, you'll find Connor easily, and you can talk to him on that. I don't want to speak on his thing, but this is that. You'll hear me talk about a medical procedure, strange romantic relationships I've had. I'm gonna probably I think I bash my mother a little bit, but in a kind of playful way. It's a fun 11-12 minute routine I do. Okay,
well, we're going to play that now, and then we'll talk a little bit after.
Sounds great, thank you.
All right.
Please welcome to the stage, Max Shultz.
said, I'm Max Shultz, and I do run that show. It's goofy, but I didn't name that joke, the show, so I'm going to tell you jokes that I did right. When I was a freshman in high school, my math class, our final exam was to solve the BP oil crisis, which sounds ridiculous because you're 14, you're not supposed to solve, like, global crises. But the reason that was our final exam was because my teacher earlier in the year expressed to us very blatantly something along the lines of, yeah, I have no certification to teach anybody anything. Don't tell your parents. And then I didn't. I was polite. I waited some time, and then I told audiences of strangers like yourselves. So back to the final. The final was we were paired in random groups of 3 to solve the crisis. And me and my friends Ted and Alex, we got up in front of the classroom laughing because our idea, which we presented on Microsoft Paint, by the way, was to have the Navy SEALs go down to the bottom of the ocean where we assumed the problem was, take a lot of used gum and just jam it in that hole, and then go back to the top of the ocean, just strike a match, light it all on fire, crisis averted. And we're presenting this to the class, and we're laughing, and all of us at the same time are thinking, we're gonna fail math. That's we're risking the whole year on a dumb joke. And then grades came back, and we got an A-, which meant she thought it might work. And it didn't, because that's not what they did to fix the problem. But next time, call me and Ted, it might work. Also, when I was in high school, I want you guys to go on a mental journey with me. Go back to your freshman year of high school. It was probably very difficult for all of you. It was probably very tough because, let's face it, you're 14, 15 years old. Everybody is riddled with hormones that they don't know what to do with. You'll probably never be hornier the rest of your life. And everyone feels that way, but no one knows that, so it's shitty. And then when you're there in your brain, go back to your first high school romantic relationship. It was probably very uncomfortable. And I'm not saying mine was worse. I'm saying mine was more of a joke than yours. And here's what happened in mine. When I was 14, there was a Halloween high school dance that I went to, and apparently at that dance, I don't remember this, but these people insist it's true. At one point, I was in a conversation with 2 good friends of mine and a third person who would become my girlfriend. And then we talked on Facebook. She added me on Facebook, and we're talking all the time. But the problem is I don't remember that conversation, so I don't know who she is, because when you're 14 in 2009, Facebook profile photos look nothing like what you look like in real life. And we're talking for 2-3 months, and then New Year's happens. And now I'm in my mid-20s. So on New Year's, I don't remember New Year's, and that's the point of the holiday. But when you're 15 on New Year's, and you're me, you're sitting alone in your parents' house on Facebook watching Dick Clark die slowly, and just really just doing whatever you can. So that's where I was talking to this girl, and a third friend of ours messaged me, and she said, Max, what are you doing? You gotta ask her out. She's gotta become your girlfriend. You're gonna be happy, she's gonna be happy. It's what you both want, do it. And then I did it, and she said yes, and I said hooray, and about 45 seconds went by, and I went, I still don't know what she looks like. Yeah, that's a thing I did. And then we dated for a little while, and what would happen is people would say things to me like, hey, I was talking to you and your girlfriend at school. Why weren't you next to each other? And I'd be like, narrowing it down. She would message me, she'd message me on Facebook and say, hey, I waved you in the hallway. Why didn't you wave back? And I'm like, all right, she does that. I can look for the wave to find out who she is. And then my best friend said to me, hey, you guys are really cute. Why haven't I ever seen you kiss? And I said, I don't know. But what I thought was, I would love to. Bring her to me. And so I broke it off, not by being honest, but by being a shitty teenager. And I said, hey, high school's tough, right? What if we just call this off till we figure out social studies and hop back in? And she said, fuck you, if that's what you gotta say to get rid of me, whatever, fuck off. And I thought you know what? That's probably better than the truth. We'll let it lie. And then time went by, and now we're very good friends, and she knows what really happened. And I was like, yeah, I just didn't know you and pretended to know you for no one's personal gain. So when I was a child, I lived in a very liberal household, which was great because the alternative was those parents that would say things like, you can be anything you want, but if you're queer, get the fuck out of here. And I didn't have that. I had the family where my mother all but said to me growing up, I hope that you and your sister are the most profoundly gay people I ever meet. I really hope so, because my love of my life, this is my mother speaking, was Mark. I loved Mark. Mark was the best. And then he left me to sleep with a bunch of dudes, which is true. And then I would say things like, yeah, Mom, but like, what about Dad, who you're still married to? And she would say things like, he's fine, but Mark was the guy. And so, like, I did not grow up to be gay, and my sister did not grow up to be gay, but I grew up to be pansexual, and my sister grew up to be non-binary, which are two things that my mother does not understand, but supports as little as she can.
Talk a little bit longer,
and so because of that, I pay a lot of attention to all the LGBTQAI, JK, LMNOP representation, whatever form of media you might choose. And so that's why about 6 years ago, my favorite ad campaign ever ran. And if you remember this campaign, don't spoil it for your neighbor, but it was an ad campaign for the candy company Mike and Ike's. And at the time, it was about a year-long campaign, and it addressed a bunch of things right up front. One, it gave Mike and Ike characters. They were people for about that year, then they dissolved that real quick. And then they were a married couple in like 2014 or something, when it was not the corporate America cool thing to do to support like gay rights. It was really progressive of them. And then the ad campaign was that they got a divorce, and so you would go to Walgreens and you'd buy a box of Mike's or Ike's, and they were the same candy. It was just a marketing tool. And then about a year later, they got back together. I don't know if they got remarried, they're just friends, they're business partners, they're fuck buddies, I don't know. But that's why no one but me remembers this damn campaign. And I love this campaign, because like I said at the top of the joke, they supported gay marriage way before it was the thing to do in this country. But Mike and Ike's are a realist company, and yeah, we support gay marriage. But we're American-based, goddammit, and if there's one thing Americans are good at, it's getting divorced. And I think that we're probably like 3 or 4 years away from this gay divorce plague hitting America. So look out for it. A few years ago in my mid-20s, I did this thing that I think a lot of people do, where I got out of a very serious romantic relationship and didn't want to hop back into another one, and so I just kind of was a whore for a while. It's a lot of fun in short doses. You seem very appalled by this, but that's okay. It's great. I did that for about 4 months, and while I was doing that, I was sitting with this woman named Katie, and Katie and I had this perfect arrangement. The whole setup was we would have sex, we would smoke a bunch of weed, we would watch cartoons, and that was the entire thing, and it was great. And most of the time, the arrangement was I would sleep with Katie where she lived. First floor was her dad and the dog. Second floor was vacant. They were trying to rent it out. And third floor, by herself, was like a studio apartment for Katie. Great. But to get to the studio apartment, we had to go by Dad and the dog. So I had met Dad and the dog a few times. And one time, around this time of year, in the dead of winter, it is snowing outside, and it is like -10. And for the only time in knowing Katie, we did the things. We watched cartoons, we smoked a bunch of weed, we had sex, and then we fell asleep, and we'd never fallen asleep together before. It was very awkward. And then we woke up at about 3:30 in the morning, and I went, I gotta go home. And she said, okay. And she walks me down the stairs, down the other set of stairs, to the door. It is 3:30 in the morning, it's freezing. She presumably goes back to sleep, door shuts, I turn around, and there's her dad walking the dog. And maybe it's because I was high, I don't know, but what happened was he said, going home, and I should have said yes, and then nothing else. What I did say was yes, but I can't leave yet because I don't know what your name is. And then he didn't skip a beat, and he said, that's all right, you can call me Dad. And what I should have said was nothing and drove home. What I did say was, no, I can't. And then I drove home and texted Katie, I love what we've got going on, but we can never do this at your house ever again. And she was cool with it. I got one more joke to tell you guys, I'm going to get out of here. But thank you so much. You guys are a great audience. This has been so much fun. Middle of last year, I'm fine. I'm going to open this story by telling you guys, like, I am okay. But the doctors thought I might not be okay, so I had to have a procedure done, and that procedure was I had a colonoscopy when I was 24. Yeah, it's great. I recommend it to everybody. Go out, get one. Because, like, a few things happen when you get a colonoscopy. If you guys haven't done it again, go to town. My doctor's great. So beforehand, you have that appointment with the doctor that says, like, here's what we're going to do, and here's when we're going to do it. And they say you can either go on drugs and you're unconscious, or you can choose to not do that. It's about the same price, and you just kind of hang out while we shove a giant thing up you. And I said, who chooses that? And they go, no one, but we had to throw it out there. So then you go in, you get the colonoscopy, and the way it works is they give you a drug called propofol. And propofol is the drug, if you don't know, that Michael Jackson overdosed on, and I totally get why. It's delightful. Because they inject it like an IV into your arm, it looks like milk, you go unconscious, you wake up, and then you're the highest you've ever been for like a day. It's great. So what they don't tell you, though, is that you go under, they shove the thing up, you look around, and then you're good, I guess. But then you have amnesia, and you wake up, fall asleep, wake up, fall asleep, wake up, fall asleep, before you can go about your day and just be stoned. And for me, they wheeled me back out to like the wake-up room or whatever it is, and and I woke up, and I said to the nurse, hey, I know it was a minor procedure, but had I died in there, my last words would have been, that looks like milk. I know it was a minor procedure, but had I died in there, my last words would have been, that looks like milk. Hey, I know it was a minor procedure, but had I died in there, my last words would have been, that looks like milk. And I did that, like that, apparently, 12 times before I was, like, awoken for good. And on the 12th time, the nurse said to me, Max, you told me that a dozen times. It was funny the first 2 and maybe the 7th time. But your ride is here. Please eat these Cheez-Its and get out of the hospital. And I said, okay, and then I was high for a day. I'm Max Shultz. You're the best fucking audience. Thanks so much.
One more time for Max Shultz, ladies and gentlemen.
That was great, Max. I have had a colonoscopy recently, actually, because I turned 50. That was not my experience. I did not feel high after. I don't know what happened, but I don't know. Maybe it was different for me somehow. But
Sorry.
It worked pretty well. You're right about the unconscious thing. It just sort of hits you, and you're just out. And,
yeah, I've been close with that for a little while, like probably 4 months now. And it's so funny, the reactions I get, like that crowd, you can't really hear in their responses. But it was at a college, so we were like expecting mostly college students, and it was the opposite. It was like there were maybe a dozen college kids, and everybody else there was primarily in their like 60s, which was odd. But that joke, like in that crowd, like I got a lot of people being like, "Oh, that is what it's like." But if I tell that joke, to mostly people my age, there's this like look of almost terror over their faces at the beginning of it, like just utter fear of getting a colonoscopy.
Yeah, it's not bad. It was weird because I had never been put out before, and it was a little scary. But
see, I was put out. I'd never been put out like that, but I had dental surgery a handful of years ago where I had laughing gas.
Oh, I had that too. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess you're right. That is the only time that I've been completely under. Yeah.
So that was good, and seemed like the audience liked you.
Yeah, they seem to. It was a really fun show. And if listeners, if you guys want to see the visual of that, see me doing that routine, if you go to YouTube and type in my name, Maxwell Shultz, it'll come up. My name is Maxwell on almost any professional thing I have. But yeah, if you just look up Maxwell Shultz on YouTube, that should come up pretty quickly.
All right. Well, I'm sure people can do that. And did you have a website you want them to go to?
Yeah, so other than YouTube, you can find pretty much everything I've ever done, or links to it on my website, maxwellschultz.com, maxwellschultz.com. And then I have stuff on YouTube. I have very, very old stuff on Bandcamp, also under my name. And you can find me on Facebook and Twitter, just Maxwell Shultz. I'm pretty accessible. I would plug stuff, but there's no shows happening anywhere. But the only thing I can really plug that I can think of right now is I run a Zoom open mic every Wednesday at 10 p.m. And I will advertise that. I advertise that on Facebook, and I will start advertising it on Twitter as well. If you want in on that as a listener, either contact me or if Aaron's willing, maybe contact him, and he can point you in my direction.
I'm willing.
Yeah, cool. It's pretty fun. It's usually this will be the third week we've done it. In the past 2 weeks, it's usually been like 15 people perform, which is cool. So I got that going on. My book is called This Is Why You Know Me. That is available on Amazon, my website, and bullmoose.com. And then, like I said, my radio show will run again on WUML.org. Once it's all over, Tuesdays at 6 p.m. And my podcast, 1 Hour Parking, currently there are 49 episodes available on any podcasting app except for Spotify. And then we will have new episodes up soon. I don't have like a time frame, but when is this airing?
I think we're going to do this toward the end of the month in April. It's okay. I think it's April 27th.
Okay, then by the time this airs, I hope to have had at least one episode air. New episode of 1 Hour Parking, which is my podcast. That's kind of a similar format to what we're doing here. But I have a co-host, Ben Bunker. That should air a new episode by the time this does, but we'll see. We're playing around with it a little bit right now. I think that's everything I have to plug, I think. But just I think I left this out earlier too, and I can close on this if you want. If you guys are, like listeners, if you, whatever age you are, if you're looking to go into stand-up, and like I understand most people go into stand-up when they're 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. I know people who are – there's a guy I can think of specifically who has to be in his 80s who did his first open mic 4 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can start at any age. It is fun at any age. And if you're even kind of thinking about doing it, go do it because you'll learn immediately if you like it or not. You'll either get on stage and have a panic attack and hate this, or you won't and you'll like it. At least a little bit, and maybe you can find your groove with that. Anybody in my real life, or even just people I meet after a show or something that say I'd love to do that, I just tell them do it once. Find an open mic, do it once, see what you think, because they're around. It's very easy to get on the stage.
Yeah, for some people, and
I'm sorry, I don't mean like nerves wise. I mean like physically, there are stages around.
Yes, there are. Yeah.
Nerves wise, like I mean I guess ideally beforehand know how you feel about public speaking, like in high school or something. Could you do it without dying a little bit inside? But if not, or if you're unsure, I'd say give it a shot.
All right. Sounds good. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I will see you around when we get out of our houses, and that'll be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. And of course, you're welcome to also join those Zoom mics if you're awake, but I know your son.
Yeah, well, I'll give it a try. When did you say it was again?
I run them Wednesdays at 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. And
thanks so much.
All right. So this has been Max Shultz, and I wanted to again mention that the Hearing Room is at hearingroom.net, and we also want to thank the Greenville Junction Shop, JUNKTIONSHOPPE, Greenville Junction Shop in Greenville, New Hampshire, and on Facebook Marketplace. So everybody have a great week and listen in again next time for more exciting and fun stuff on the Woodshed podcast.
If you start with a dream and share it with some friends, the idea deepens and grows. The dream takes shape, it has form and substance, and community soon arose. A listening room, a hearing room, a place to find a home to play. A listening room, the hearing room, express your stay